The war in Europe is over. Berlin has fallen. The world believes the great fleets of World War II are finished. But in the suffocating darkness of the Malacca Strait, 5 thin-skinned British destroyers are racing straight toward a Japanese heavy cruiser built to annihilate them. By every rule of naval warfare, this should be suicide. The cruiser is heavier, her guns are bigger, her torpedoes can kill from miles away. And yet before dawn she will be at the bottom of the sea. How did 5 smaller ships destroy a warship that outmatched them in every way? This wasn't just a battle, it was the night the old rules of naval power died. Stay with me because what happens in the next few minutes will prove that sometimes the future sinks the past in total darkness. Before we go any further, I have a question for you. If a heavy cruiser outweighs her attackers 3-1, if her guns outrange them, if her torpedoes can kill from miles away, then how did 5 lightly armored destroyers manage to sink her in open combat in the dark without losing a single ship? Somewhere in this story is the exact reason it happened. Not luck, not recklessness, not a miracle. A specific advantage changed the outcome of this battle, and it's hidden within the events you're about to witness. Listen carefully because when you hear it, you'll realize this wasn't just the sinking of a ship, it was the moment an entire era of naval warfare ended. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. 16 May 1945. 1:30 hours, Malacca Strait. The war in Europe is already over. Berlin has fallen. The world believes the great fleets of the Second World War are finished with one another. And yet, in the suffocating darkness between Malaya and Sumatra, 5 British destroyers are racing toward a single target. Ahead of them steams a heavy cruiser of the Imperial Japanese Navy, battered, under-repaired, but still bristling with 8-inch guns and the deadliest torpedoes ever built. By every known rule of naval warfare, this should be suicide. A heavy cruiser outweighs a destroyer 3-1. Her guns outrange them. One accurate salvo could erase an entire ship in seconds, and yet 5 destroyers are closing in. This is not a balanced engagement. It is a calculated hunt. But here is the contradiction. The hunted ship still carries weapons capable of killing every attacker in a single coordinated strike. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Her torpedoes can travel miles in silence before detonating with apocalyptic force. Her crew has survived 4 years of continuous war, and the strait itself narrow, humid, black as ink, leaves no room for error. One wrong maneuver, one radar echo misread, and the hunters become wreckage. History insists this should have ended differently, because the target that night was the Japanese heavy cruiser Haguro, one of the last major surface combatants still operational in the collapsing Japanese fleet. She was not sailing to fight a battle. She was sailing on a desperate mission: food, ammunition, medical supplies, reinforcements. Thousands of isolated Japanese troops in the Andaman Islands were starving. The empire was shrinking by the week. Supply lines had been cut, aircraft carriers were gone. Battleships lay at the bottom of distant seas. So command chose speed over safety. Send a cruiser, send her fast. Send her through waters now controlled by the Royal Navy. No rational commander would attempt this unless there were no other options left. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. That is exactly what made the mission inevitable. But what neither side fully understood in that humid darkness was this. The British were waiting. Signals had been intercepted, movements tracked, a trap prepared with patience and precision. 5 destroyers against 1 cruiser. It should not have been enough, and yet the British commanders believed something the Japanese did not. They believed the age of the heavy cruiser was already over. The question was whether they could prove it in the dark before Haguro's guns found them. Because once the first shots were fired, there would be no retreat in the Malacca Strait. Only fire. 1:45 hours. The air hangs heavy over the Malacca Strait, visibility is poor. The sea is calm, almost deceptively calm. To the north, 5 British destroyers advance in a loose formation, running dark. At their center is the flotilla leader, HMS Saumarez. With her are HMS Verulam, HMS Vigilant, HMS Venus Virago. 5 narrow hulls of steel, lightly armored, thin-skinned. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Each carrying torpedoes, their only true answer to a cruiser's broadside. By every traditional doctrine, destroyers screen capital ships. They do not charge them. Yet this night, there is no battleship behind them, no carrier air cover above them, no margin for reinforcement. Only radar. British radar operators stare into flickering green screens below decks. Blips appear faint, intermittent, then sharpen. Range closes. The advantage of surprise belongs to the British. The advantage of firepower belongs to Haguro. And firepower, in naval war, has always ruled. A heavy cruiser's 8-inch shells can tear a destroyer in half. One hit to the magazines, and a ship disappears in flame. One hit to the bridge, and command collapses into chaos. The Japanese, meanwhile, are not blind. Aboard Haguro, lookouts strain into the night. She is escorted by the destroyer Kamikaze, a veteran vessel with her own lethal torpedoes. They know these waters are dangerous. They know British forces dominate the region. But they believe, perhaps fatally, that no enemy surface squadron would dare attack a heavy cruiser head on. That belief is the first crack in the armor. British command has studied Haguro's weaknesses. Her engines are worn, her maximum speed reduced, her radar obsolete. The plan is simple. In theory, encircle, isolate, and launch coordinated torpedo attacks from multiple angles. In theory, in practice, it requires perfect timing, flawless communication, and nerves that do not fracture under incoming shellfire. Because once Haguro spots them, she will not hesitate. And at 2 o'clock hours, the first Japanese lookouts report shapes on the horizon. The trap is closing. But traps can snap both ways, and the next decision, whether Haguro turns to fight or flee, will determine who becomes prey. 2:15 hours. The Malacca Strait becomes a corridor of fire. As Haguro completes her turn, her guns lock onto the nearest threat. HMS Saumarez now charging directly toward her bow. By every rational calculation, this is madness. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Saumarez is closing the distance against a cruiser whose shells outweigh her own crewmen. A single hit will not merely damage her, it will end her. And then it happens. A Japanese shell slams into Saumarez's forecastle. Steel folds, the deck erupts. Men are thrown like fragments into the night. The destroyer is crippled, but not sunk, her speed bleeding away. Her bow wrecked, fires burning forward. This is the moment most commanders would withdraw. But withdrawal would mean abandoning the trap. Instead, the remaining destroyers press harder. While Haguro focuses on the wounded ship, HMS Verulam and HMS Vigilant close from opposite bearings, using radar to cut through darkness the human eye cannot penetrate. The Japanese cruiser's fire control struggles to keep up. Targets appear, disappear, reappear at new angles. This is the hidden truth of late-war naval combat. Guns are powerful, but information is decisive. Haguro fires again, salvo after salvo, but the destroyers refuse to remain where logic says they should be. The sea explodes around them, yet no killing blow lands. And now the distance has collapsed to less than 10,000 yards. Torpedo range, British commanders issue the order without ceremony, launch. Steel tubes open, compressed air hisses. Torpedoes slide into the water and vanish, running silent toward a target too large to miss. Haguro realizes the danger too late. Her helm swings hard, engines strain to accelerate. But the cruiser's worn machinery betrays her. She cannot outrun the geometry of converging torpedo tracks. Still, the Japanese fight on. Secondary guns hammer at the attackers. Searchlights stab wildly across the sea, illuminating flashes of destroyer hulls and making Haguro herself a glowing target. The strait has become a killing ground. And somewhere beneath the surface, long steel fish are closing the distance. The next moments will decide whether Haguro escapes or whether this battle becomes her grave. 2:20 hours beneath the surface of the Malacca Strait, the torpedoes run true. Aboard Haguro, alarms scream through steel corridors. Lookouts shout bearings. The helm is hard over. Engines are pushed beyond what exhausted turbines can safely endure. But physics does not negotiate. The first torpedo strikes along the port side. The explosion is not a flash, it is a concussion that lifts thousands of tons of warship sideways. Steel plates buckle inward, compartments rupture, men vanish in an instant of steam and darkness. Moments later, a second detonation. Then a third. By every known rule of survival at sea, 3 torpedo hits should mean immediate death for a ship already worn by years of war. And yet, Haguro does not sink. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. She staggers. Speed drops sharply. Steering falters. Internal communications break down as power lines snap and floodwater surges through torn bulkheads. But her guns continue firing. That is the terrifying resilience of a heavy cruiser, even mortally wounded. she remains lethal. British destroyers must now perform the most dangerous maneuver of the night, re-attack. Because a damaged cruiser still carries her own torpedoes, the infamous oxygen-fueled weapons capable of outranging anything the British possess. If Haguro launches them blindly into the dark, the hunters could become the hunted within minutes. On HMS Venus and HMS Virago, captains make the same calculation. Close again, no hesitation. They turn back toward the burning silhouette. Searchlights now illuminate Haguro in full, a wounded giant trailing smoke, fires flickering along her decks, yet still defiant. Secondary guns rake the sea. Shell splashes bracket the destroyers once more. History insists the crippled cruiser should still have the advantage. She outweighs them, outguns them, outranges them, but she is losing speed, and in a confined strait, speed is life. Another spread of torpedoes enters the water, this time at closer range. There will be no outrunning them now. The next explosions will not wound, they will decide everything. 25 hours. The second wave arrives. Torpedoes from HMS Venus and HMS Virago cut through black water toward a cruiser already bleeding speed. On the bridge of Haguro, officers know what is coming. They have felt the first blows. They have heard the screams from below decks. They know the bulkheads are failing. Here's the answer to the earlier question. The 5 destroyers won because they understood something Haguro's commanders did not. Information had become more powerful than armor. Radar, not bigger guns. Coordination, not tonnage. Speed of detection, not thickness of steel. The British destroyers used radar to see through darkness, to track, to reposition, and to launch coordinated torpedo attacks from multiple angles before Haguro could effectively respond. The cruiser still had heavier guns. She still had deadly torpedoes. She still had armor, but she did not control the information space. And by May 1945, that was fatal. That is the answer. The future of naval warfare no longer belonged to the biggest ship. It belonged to the side that could see first, decide first, and strike first. And in the Malacca Strait that night, that side was not the heavy cruiser. It was 5 destroyers who understood the future before their enemy did. But retreat is no longer possible. The strait is narrow. The engines are compromised, and British destroyers still circle beyond the reach of her failing searchlights. Then the sea erupts again. Another torpedo detonates along the starboard quarter. The blast tears into engineering spaces already struggling to stay afloat. Steam floods compartments, lights flicker and die. The cruiser lurches violently, her list increasing. Within minutes, yet another explosion follows. 45, possibly more impacts by every known standard of naval endurance. This is catastrophic. Haguro's speed collapses to a crawl. Steering becomes erratic. Fire control loses synchronization. Her main guns fire sporadically, now defiant but disorganized. This is the moment history insists the battle should end cleanly, but war rarely grants clean endings. Even crippled, Haguro still carries her own torpedoes. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The long-range Type 93 weapons that have already sunk countless Allied ships earlier in the war. If launched blindly into the strait, they could still claim one final victory. British commanders know this. They maintain distance just long enough to avoid a desperate counterstrike, then close again to finish what they have started. It is no longer a duel. It is an execution under fire. Inside the cruiser, damage control teams fight rising water with failing pumps. Ammunition handlers struggle to keep guns supplied. Smoke chokes passageways. Orders are shouted through darkness. This is not a cinematic last stand. It is confusion. Heat, flooding steel. And at 2:32 hours, Haguro begins to lose forward momentum entirely. She is no longer a hunter. She is a burning target in open water. But even now, she does not sink. The British must deliver the final blow. And in the darkness of the Malacca Strait, they prepare to do exactly that. 2:35 hours. The silhouette of Haguro is no longer advancing. She is drifting. Listing heavily to port, fires climbing higher along her midships. She has become what every capital ship fears most: stationary under torpedo attack. Around her, the British destroyers reform. M. Saumarez, wounded, but afloat, falls back, her shattered bow testament to how close this fight has come to disaster. The others close in deliberate arcs. This is no longer an exchange of broadsides. This is geometry, angles, bearings, timing. No rational commander would linger near a dying cruiser. A final torpedo spread from Haguro could still tear a destroyer apart. Ammunition aboard the cruiser could detonate catastrophically. But hesitation now would prolong the fight and risk daylight revealing them to Japanese aircraft. So the British choose finality. Another spread is fired. At such close range, evasion is impossible. The torpedoes strike. The detonations are deeper this time below the armor belt, where buoyancy lives. The cruiser shudders violently. Her list increases sharply. Flooding accelerates beyond control. On Haguro's decks, men scramble toward lifelines. Some continue manning guns that can no longer be aimed. Others attempt to free life rafts under falling debris. By every known rule of naval warfare, this is the inevitable conclusion of cumulative damage. But inevitability does not lessen terror. Approximately 240 hours. Haguro rolls further onto her side. Water pours across the deck. Her propellers lift partially clear of the sea, a grotesque, exposed sign that balance has been lost. Then, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum, the cruiser capsizes. Steel groans, air escapes in thunderous bursts. Fires hiss out as black water engulfs them. Within minutes, the heavy cruiser that once roamed the Pacific sinks beneath the surface of the Malacca Strait. Nearly 900 men had sailed aboard her. Hundreds will not survive the night. The sea closes. Silence returns, broken only by the sound of small craft lowering to search for survivors. By every traditional measure of naval power, 5 destroyers should not have destroyed a heavy cruiser in open combat. And yet, they have. But this battle was not merely about one ship. It marked something far larger. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Dawn approaches over the Malacca Strait. Oil spreads across the water in widening black patterns. Debris drifts silently where, minutes earlier, one of the Imperial Japanese Navy's last heavy cruisers had fought for survival. Beneath the surface lies Haguro. Around Faye men had been aboard her when she entered the strait. More than Faye will never leave it. British destroyers move cautiously among the wreckage. HMS Venus and HMS Virago lower boats despite the risk. Survivors are pulled from oil, slicked water, exhausted, burned, stunned into silence. The escorting Japanese destroyer had fled earlier in the chaos, unable to alter the outcome. By every known rule of Faye's naval doctrine, this engagement should have favored the heavy cruiser. Armor, bigger guns. Longer range torpedoes. Psychological dominance. But by May Faye, those rules had decayed. Radar had replaced eyesight. Coordination had replaced brute tonnage. Speed of information had eclipsed thickness of armor. This battle became the final occasion in which Royal Navy destroyers destroyed a major enemy warship in a surface torpedo attack. It was not merely a tactical victory. It was a closing chapter. The age of the armored surface raider, the roaming cruiser dictating engagements by gun caliber, ended. Not with a fleet clash, but in a narrow strait at night, hunted by smaller ships that refused to accept the mathematics of their own vulnerability. History insists this should not have been possible. 5 destroyers against 1 heavy cruiser. And yet the result was decisive. Within 3 months, the Pacific War itself would end. Japan's remaining surface fleet would never again challenge Allied control of the sea in open combat. The Malacca Strait was not the largest battle of the war. It was not the bloodiest, but it was symbolic. A final gunfight between eras, and in that darkness, steel proved something unsettling. Power does not always belong to the largest ship. Sometimes it belongs to the side that understands the future first. The sea closed over Haguro. The war was nearly finished. But for those who fought in that strait, it had never felt more immediate. And in those final surface gun flashes of World War II, the old world of naval dominance slipped beneath the water, never to rise again.